Extreme temperatures hit European countries in 2025, with the year likely to be one of the warmest on record. It brought severe heat waves, wildfires, flooding and drought. So, how has the world reacted to the changing weather patterns as we look back at the biggest climate stories of 2025? Hello and welcome to Roundtable's Climate Year in Review. I'm Enda Brady. Now, at the start of the year, figures revealed that 2024 was the hottest year on record as temperatures went 1.6 degrees Celsius above pre-industrial levels. That made it the first calendar year to breach the 1.5 degrees outlined in the Paris Agreement from COP21. So, what is contributing to the global heating up, and is there really a climate emergency? I want to get your take on this first of all. You don't believe in climate change.
I do believe in climate change. I don't believe human beings are creating it. It will make a small difference, but there is no possibility, in my view, that the tiny contribution that human beings make to what is a trace gas, which is carbon dioxide, could be wagging the dog of the atmosphere. Just think about the figures here. The atmosphere only contains 0.04% carbon dioxide. And every year, human beings generate about 1/20th of the CO2 which goes into the atmosphere. The rest is natural. So I don't believe that tiny, tiny proportion to that trace gas will be making a difference that we can easily measure. Certainly, I don't think that there's a climate emergency. That doesn't mean we should be imprudent with how we use fossil fuels, but it does mean that we shouldn't be frightening the life out of people and having incredibly expensive carbon dioxide reducing policies, which actually hobble economies, but don't really make any difference to the environment.
Chris, come in here. I can see you're not impressed.
No. It's well, scientific consensus does disagree with you massively.
Science isn't consensus. Science is science. Tell me the facts that you disagree
scientific with. We have, well, our temperature, the temperature of the planet is increasing year in, year out. We have been able to plot from pre-industrial until now changes in the temperature based on and tracking them very, very closely towards our emissions and temperatures going up. Say for the El Nino, El Nina, which has been kind of a brake or a little accelerator on it as it continues on, up until this year. And this year's when we end up hitting or going over a 1.5, potentially 1.6 degrees above. You talk about how expensive it is to be putting in climate policies. Yeah. Last year, we spent $350 billion on the globe on trying to clean up after the messes, after the problems that climate change, that man-made climate change has caused. Currently, right now, the US is going to spend $120 billion on cleaning up after the mess within the wildfires in California. It is an awful lot cheaper to be putting in policies now that tries to mitigate these problems and tries to slow down the issues that we're creating than it is to be trying to be just not worrying about it and thinking about it later on.
Sorry to interrupt again, but I totally reject the claim that we are in an unusual climate situation. The medieval warm period 400, 500 years ago was much warmer than now. The Roman warm period, still in human memory, 2,000 years ago was warmer than now. They were growing grapes in the north of England. And then if you go right back, we have ice ages, we're living in one now, and most of the history of...
Hang on, Len, but ice ages, we're living in one now. It was 40 Celsius at London Heathrow a couple of summers ago. That's not an ice age.
Ice age means that you've got polar ice, ice on the north and the south pole. For most of the last 500 million years, that hasn't happened. And this is a much cooler than average period at the moment if you look about geological time. And I have to disagree with Christopher. When you look at it across that period, it seems that carbon dioxide isn't the driver. Otherwise, why was carbon dioxide going up about 12,000 years ago in a period called Younger Dryas while temperature was going down? One other thing, it went up after this period called Younger Dryas, everything went a lot warmer in 50 years, much faster than we're seeing now. And no one can pretend that all that time ago it was human-generated carbon dioxide.
Let's bring in Amira. Amira, what would you say to Lembit's science here?
Well, as someone who has a PhD and has actually contributed to the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, process of looking at the evidence, I would say that we're talking about hundreds upon hundreds of studies conducted by hundreds upon hundreds of scientists with very, very high standards in terms of what is allowed to be said. Just making even the most basic attributional statements takes months sometimes. It's a huge exercise and it involves scientists from all over the world. So that's what I will say to that. I also feel that some of this conversation is a bit of a distraction because ultimately we're talking about the lived experience of people across the world, okay? We have seen the devastating wildfires in Los Angeles, which have caused over 250 billion in US dollars in economic losses and damage. They have affected people's lives. They've destroyed people's homes. These levels of disasters are happening all over the world. So we had over the summer in Grenada, Hurricane Beryl, which caused over 30 billion US dollars in damage overnight. In Pakistan, where I spent almost 10 years working on climate change research, 30 billion from floods, which were exceptional floods, which basically the lived experience of people is showing that the climate is changing, and it's changing in ways which is causing massive economic and infrastructural devastation. So ultimately, you know, who is debating whether it's a real phenomenon or not? We should really focus on people who are living and the experiences of their lives. What I've noticed as someone who's also done research with people who are frustrated about climate change activism, people who don't see themselves in the story of climate change, what you tend to find is that the large majority of people do believe that climate change is happening based on their lived experience. That includes across the UK, Conservative voters, for example. That includes some of those frustrated voters in different countries who identify themselves more on the right of the political spectrum. So the question is, what is the lived experience? And if you speak to firefighters, it's very interesting. If you speak to firefighters, as an example, in Australia and in the US, they will tell you that their conditions have changed. So I think we should pay attention to a combination of science and lived experience. The large majority of people who are denying that climate change exists tend to be from quite privileged backgrounds, ultimately aren't necessarily feeling the brunt of it.
This summer, Europe experienced a series of extreme heat waves causing wildfires, drought, and hundreds of heat-related deaths. Spain saw temperatures reach almost 46 degrees Celsius. So, are these severe heat waves becoming the new climate reality for Europe? It's not a case anymore of if we're going to get a heat wave. It's almost a case of how many heat waves we're going to get in Europe. How concerned are you?
Right, very concerned. This has definitely become rapidly the new normal in Europe. We're seeing longer periods of heat. We're seeing more intense periods. We're seeing earlier periods as well that are interfering with harvests. In 2023, there were over 47,000 deaths across Europe that were related to heat. I don't know how many more we're going to see this year. It's a very, very serious health issue. It's a food security issue. It's a political issue.
Samantha, to you, I read the phrase last week, Europe was covered by a heat dome. I've never heard that before. I mean, what we're seeing now in all your experience of working in the weather, how different is this kind of heat?
So we've always had heat dome-like events. So a heat dome is effectively a high pressure system that's very stable. And it gets stuck, if you will. So we've always had these high pressure systems that lead to hotter than average temperatures and sunnier than average temperatures, because the way these heat domes work is we've got hot air in the upper atmosphere that gets pushed down. As it gets pushed down, it warms up, which warms up where we live, and it also pushes away the clouds. So depending on the meteorological dynamics or the dynamics of the weather, they can be very stable for days or weeks at a time. But what was unusual about the one that we saw at the end of June, early July, was it was more intense. It impacted a larger area of Europe than normal, and it lasted quite a long time. So we were seeing temperatures that would normally be seen in late July, early August, and we were seeing those record temperatures at the end of June.
So, Pauline, is this the new reality now for European climate, that every summer we're going to see more of these heat domes, more heat waves, and we should be getting concerned?
Well, I think compared to my childhood, from the north of Germany, now I've been living in Turkey for the past 6 years. I mean, here we are fairly used to hot weather, but even here you can see the effects currently. It's been getting very, very hot in Istanbul as well. But I remember last week when we had this heat wave, this recent heat wave in Germany, for the first time ever, my family was telling me that they didn't have water because the pressure in the pipes, I guess, rapidly decreased. So in Hamburg, there was a lack of water supply, which I find very, very surprising and very shocking. And we can also see wildfires in Germany currently that are they're still trying to get under control. So you can definitely see a shift in more extreme weather, both during the summer, but also during the other seasons in Germany as well.
Margaret, to you, Gleda mentioned the figure there, 47,000 people last year dying of heat-related ailments as a result of increasing heat across Europe. How seriously should governments be taking this now? Because these are not one-off events.
Exactly. And in fact, we've did a study comparing heat-related deaths between 2004 and 2017, 2021, and they increased by approximately 85%. And we found that there were between 2000 and 2019 at least 489,000 heat-related deaths. 45% of these were in Asia, but 36% in Europe. And that's really a very big difference.
And Margaret, when people pass away as a result of the heat, is this because of overexposure or dehydration? Just talk me through. Obviously, everyone is different, but I'm guessing it just affects people in different ways.
Well, yes, but it's really because the skin is your largest organ in the body. And if you're exposed, if your skin is your temperature control organ. So if the heat rises above what works for the body, which is above 37 degrees, particularly, but it can be at lower heats, the skin works very, very hard to try to get rid of that heat. And all the blood flow goes to your skin. It goes away from your gut, and your gut starts to have problems and releases toxins. It also goes away from your heart. Now, if you're a young, fit, healthy person, you can probably deal with that. You know, it's a strain on your system, but you can deal with that. But if you're older and you've already got underlying heart disease or lung disease, that will be enough to tip you over. And so that's how most people die. That's how most of the heat-related deaths occur. You can have heat stroke, which is absolutely just the heat, and that can happen to anybody if they are overexposed to heat. But it's really about the underlying situation in your body, and then exacerbated by what your body is trying to deal with when exposed to too much heat.
Well, one way the UK is aiming to combat extreme heat and cool the planet is by dimming the sun through geoengineering. The government is giving scientists millions of pounds to use the controversial climate change technology. But should humans really be interfering with global weather patterns in this way? In very simple terms, what are they trying to achieve here?
Sure. Well, this is part of an initiative that was set up by the last government to try and make exciting new science a reality. And one of the parts that this ARIA initiative is doing is putting 50 million pounds into geoengineering. Geoengineering is the idea where we're already conducting a very large science experiment whereby we're putting large amounts of carbon into the atmosphere and we're seeing what happens. And largely that isn't a good thing, you know, what's the results we're seeing. This is the idea that we can be reversing or slowing, at least slowing some of the impacts of climate change, global warming, by doing other things. Other things might be adding more. So there's 5 experiments that are being 5 outdoors experiments that are being done under this initiative. Principally, we're putting up like a balloon, either over the UK or the US, probably the US, releasing some particles into the atmosphere, watching it, how the reflections of the sunlight pushes back out again, and them being very responsible, they'll be collecting the particles, taking them back in again. Another part of it is creating more ice sheets. It's basically ways of trying to see if you can reflect sunlight back up to try and slow down the main efforts, so the main effects of global warming.
Pete, do you think we should be doing this? I mean, some people say humans have created the problem. therefore scientists should be fixing it. Do you think we should be interfering?
Well, I think we've got to recognize where we are with the climate crisis. It is caused by the buildup of CO2 in the atmosphere, and it's going to keep warming until we eliminate those emissions. Then it will stay warm more or less indefinitely until we pull that CO2 very difficultly, very slowly out of the atmosphere. In the meantime, the planet's going to be dangerously hot for decades to centuries. These solar geoengineering ideas offer a way to manage the heat that will come in a warmer world while we tackle these other issues. We're not sure if it's right to go ahead with these, but I believe we're in such a dire situation that we really need to carefully consider all of our options.
James, just come in on that point. So what we're hearing from Pete, it's so bad, we have to take action now. We have to do this. Do you agree?
It's actually much worse than most people think, and we absolutely have to take action. And as Pete just said, the thing that we need to take action about is to rapidly reduce greenhouse gas emissions. Until we phase out coal, oil and gas, we are going to continue to drive the concentrations of those gases in the atmosphere higher. We're going to continue to see more warming. We're going to continue to see more loss and damages. And if we're unlucky, we could risk catastrophic climate change sometime over this century. I mean, there's already increasing evidence that climate change is accelerating. So that's all I think now becoming established. What the question that you've got right now is, do we try and counteract one type of interference with the climate system with another type? And on that, I think the proposal to undertake geoengineering, solar radiation management is utterly unhinged.
So, James, just to go back on what you said, genuinely you believe we're at a tipping point and that the Earth is in very serious danger?
Yeah, I mean, arguably, we've already crossed certain tipping points in the, let's say, the Greenland ice sheet, the Western Antarctic ice sheet. We might be seeing the slowing down of large ocean currents that might be operating in the Atlantic. Regions of the Amazon are already becoming a source of carbon dioxide. The science on tipping points seems to be developing that the more that we look into these aspects of the climate system, in some respects, the worse it gets. Now, the conclusion of that science, I would like to think, is that we need to do everything that we possibly can to rapidly stop burning fossil fuels and also reform our food systems. What we can't allow policymakers to do is give them the option that somehow we can fix the existing and future climate damage with some other kind of technological solution. So whilst I'm actually quite a strong supporter of the blue sky research that can be conducted around solar radiation management or any kind of geoengineering, we can't be naive about what policymakers will very likely do with those possible future technologies, which is continue to skirt their responsibilities to implement really effective climate policy.
Chris, talking of policymakers, how frustrating for you then is it that President Trump, for example, the most powerful politician in the world, drill, baby, drill. You're wanting to move away from fossil fuels, and that's his response.
No, it is. It is deeply frustrating, and obviously in kind of ferocious agreement with James there. What we need to be doing. Okay, we need to be pulling back on fossil fuels, 100%. And that is the great risk of geoengineering, is that it is used as a lot of fossil fuel money is going into this space, and be it carbon capture and storage, or be it kind of space mirrors, whatever it might be. And they're using it as a shield, as a way of allowing them to be maintaining business as usual, doing what they're doing for longer. You know, because the longer they can keep on doing it, the richer they will keep getting. We know exactly what needs to be done. And we know how long we have to do it, roughly. Latest IPCC reports is even more aggressive. We've got about 7 years to be dramatically cutting back and getting to net zero. If we spend an extra 4 or 5 years digging into this research here, it prompts to be a waste of time and a distraction, and also a way of us being pointed in the wrong direction. And it's being thinking that there's a false sense of security in there, and for policymakers and politicians around the world to be saying, no, it's okay, it's less urgent because we've got this great mass, this great plaster that we can be using, and it's bad.
And just tell me, Chris, your area of expertise, renewables. You're obviously a believer that this is what we should be putting money towards.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. If we focus in on renewable, in very large parts of the world, renewables are already cheaper than their fossil fuel equivalents. So we should be moving as rapidly as we can in that direction. We need to be changing the narrative, and instead of having the narrative around we will all be going back into caves and all of the enormously negative messaging that has been predominant, we need to be talking about the future, clean air, clean water, being out of the pockets of fossil fuel companies and empires. It is a better, having energy security around the world. It's a better world, a better planet if we can transition away, and it also allows us to be, thriving economically as well.
Now, the biggest climate event of the year rounded off 2025 with COP30 taking place in Brazil. The country's president agreed to build on the last COP and treble the amount of money to help the worst affected nations adapt to the impact of climate change. But the conference was overshadowed by the absence of leaders from the world's biggest polluters. Four of the most powerful people on Earth, four of the biggest polluting countries, Russia, the United States, China, and India, their leaders are not here this week. What does that tell us?
And it's not unusual, but also at the same time, we have to remember we can't bunch them up. The reasons why they're not going are very different. So we know that Trump and Putin, for example, they are not going because they want to focus on making their countries great again, and they don't believe necessarily that climate matters to that. And some of them even deny climate. China and India, certainly China in particular, is moving ahead on climate without the UN negotiations. They've decided that this is actually something that's in our economic interest and so on. So they don't need to go to a UN conference necessarily. The leader doesn't need to go to a UN conference necessarily in order for things to move in China. But at the same time, India, similarly, they've made their particular decision. The challenge is for the other countries is how do they push these countries to do more anyway? And that's the really hard part about the UN and when leaders don't attend UN conferences.
Jim, just come in on this then, your take on why these people aren't there. Does it matter?
I think I would completely agree with yourself in terms of saying two of them just don't get it, don't want to get it for their own self-serving reasons.
Which two? That's Trump.
That's Trump and Putin. And I would say the other two, I think for the other two, it's a little bit of a pity because I think they do understand. China is making, and India for the same reason, making huge steps in terms of renewables, etc. And it's surprising that they're not. Maybe they think they're too big for it in a way. You small people go and talk to amongst yourselves whilst we do what we want to do. That may be an element of that. It's a pity, but I'm hoping, crossing my fingers, that those that are the vast majority that are attending will do the right thing and will press those other countries to do the right thing. Why? Because we all know what the future will be if we don't get it right.
Andres, you're originally from Brazil. I was struck by something your president said this week, that this is a COP in the Amazon as opposed to a COP about the Amazon. The location is very pertinent.
Mm-hmm. Yes, for sure. I think the message of bringing COP to Brazil and to a forested area in Brazil is exactly the message that we need to get all peoples involved, that we need to listen to all voices. And as the government of Brazil has said, is the COP of implementation, the COP that will try to act. And to act is about bringing everybody to the table. So this is a COP of participation.
And tell me, how much pride is there in Brazil that your country is hosting this and so many movers and shakers will be there?
I think it's very special. They even made Belém the capital of Brazil for the time of COP. And Brazilians are very proud to host this event and getting very involved with the discussions as well. So if we think about COP a few years ago, perhaps 10 years ago, it was very much a conversation of heads of state. Now we see more and more local governments, NGOs, academics, and of course now, especially in this COP, many indigenous peoples. So the conversation is becoming a lot more close to people
Georgia, to you, what do you think can be achieved in a few days in Brazil then this week?
Well, so I think what can be achieved in a few days is hard to say, but I would say that from previous COPs, we've always seen sort of ambition setting and forward-looking targets. And I really feel that at this COP this year, it should be about implementation and about countries explaining how the targets that have been set are going to be met, and outlining as well those plans and what the financing needs are there. So it's really about detailing, where and how the targets will be set for this COP.
That's it from us. Remember, you can see more discussion and debate on our YouTube channel. Search for Roundtable TRT World. And if you like what you see there, do hit that subscribe button. But for now, from me, Enda Brady, and all the team here, goodbye and thank you for watching.